Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Perspective podcast. Today we have Brian Gryn, and his goal is to help transform your life and inspire you to become happier and healthier. He does that as a part time personal trainer, part golfer, part internet entrepreneur, part author, part health coach, and he has a passion for getting the most out of individuals. And as you guys know, this is a perfect type of person that I love having on the podcast, someone that's passionate, someone that's helping people, someone that's figured out a way to make money online, to not be stuck in a brick and mortar, and really just be able to expand impact beyond, one-on-one training or one-on-one service. And so I'm stoked for this conversation. Brian, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
So as with most people in the fitness slash health industry, it kind of usually starts with your story. You were stuck, lied to, you found something that worked for you. Why don't you kind of rewind us, back to maybe before you figured these health secrets, and I guess it's really not that secrets, but these ways that
Mhm.
are helping people get healthy and stay healthy, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, my journey into health was early on, and I was lucky because my parents exposed me when I was in high school. So I thank them for that. And I actually coach high school golf, and we had our big banquet last night, and I was trying to express to them the importance of getting into working out at an early age because you just build those fundamentals. But anyways, yeah, so that was my journey into health, and then out of school, I was in the corporate scene and it wasn't for me. I always been into health and wellness and then just started coaching individuals and sort of learning more about ways to help them through strength and through nutrition. So, getting certifications and things like that. And, you know, my personal story, I never had like a huge health story. I've been lucky. I've always been fairly fit, but I did start to realize, probably when I got to my 30s, that it was a little more, I would say, difficult to keep the body that I wanted, or the fitness level that I wanted as I was getting older. And
Hmm.
so definitely had to make some shifts, and we can obviously talk about those today. But um, I've learned a lot about health and wellness, a lot from my clients, and I know we'll talk a little bit about fasting and things like that. But I had a woman client who was, pre-diabetic and got into fasting, and really just like it was like a sort of a life changer. And so that sort of was my first journey into learning about it, other than the major religions and things like that. So yeah, it's been great, and ever since then I've just been building online and trying to help as many individuals through my different programs.
I love that. And it's so interesting kind of the further you progress, in life, and really any facet, whether it be financially or work or even health, it starts to turn into less is more. Like the younger you are, I feel like the more that you can get, or whatever it is, the more satisfied you become. But that's even true with our health. You talk about intermittent fasting, and for those of you that don't know, Brian will get into it a little bit deeper, but intermittent fasting has been around for forever. I mean, it was something before it was called something. I mean, the hunter gatherer years, you might go a few days before you eat, or you're only eating a couple plant based type of things before you really get a feast. And it's a natural process for the body to go through, because there's cycles that the body has to either repair or to grow. And when we're constantly feeding, the body gets stuck in the state of blood sugar going crazy and whatnot. The body doesn't destroy kind of sick and dying cells, and it only goes into, okay, let's just build on top of that. And that's why we get to our 30s and 40s and 50s and all of a sudden start having all these issues, because our body's been in the state of building on diseased tissue for 20 or 30 years. And so less is more. You stop eating a little bit, and the body gets to go through its healing and repair phase. And all of a sudden, like you mentioned, diabetes starts to go away, blood pressure changes, all that stuff starts to change. And it's not about buying expensive supplements. It's not about buying this expensive food. It's about, hey, let's pay attention to natural cycles of the body. Um, how did you get introduced to intermittent fasting, and what kind of, what experiments have you done with it that have been, successful for you?
Yeah. Well, my first exposure to intermittent fasting was like through a client who sort of introduced it to me as this
Okay.
tool. I think she got introduced through Dr. Jason Fung, and yeah, I just started experimenting on myself before I started using it as a tool, maybe with clients. I wanted to see how I felt, and just sort of the impact it had on my health, how it would maybe hamper or help performance. And
Mhm.
so, my experience, and I always tell people, there is a bit of a self-experimentation part to all of this. There's not a one size fits all. You get the question, oh, well, what's the perfect fasting time? And, you
Right.
know, I would say there's some general rules around it, but like it really comes down to what works best for you and what's sustainable in the long term.
Hmm. Now,
So yeah,
do you mind?
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you mind going into, a little bit deeper for people? This might be a new concept for them,
Sure. Okay.
and they like the fact that, especially with inflation, food getting more expensive, like, man, if I can eat less and lose weight, that's a win-win situation. Why don't you get into it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing with fasting is that I like is it gives you sort of a guideline and gives you
Mm,
rules because if anything, it makes things, it simplifies everything to some degree, right? Because I think when people get confused with dieting, because it can be confusing, because one day you're hearing, you should eat a carnivore diet, the next day, you're hearing maybe you shouldn't, and you should go this route and that route. So
right.
I think that the simplification of the fact that what fasting does is it gives you guidelines throughout the day. And so like typically, I mean, that could be starting out, and a lot of times with clients, you want to take advantage of the overnight fast. So you're
Mhm,
obviously not eating through the night.
mhm,
And a lot of times people say, you know what, I can push back breakfast maybe a bit, and just increase that fasting window to, let's say, instead of 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or something.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I don't think there's a perfect window, like I said, but I think it's something where I think the biggest thing is like in the evenings, right? Like cutting off time to eat, like closing the kitchen at 7 o'clock. Because a lot of times after, let's just say 8, 9 o'clock, if you are sitting and watching TV or doing something and eating, a lot of times a lot of good things aren't being eaten at that time.
right.
So I think what fasting can do is it can, like you mentioned, let your body heal, give you some gut relief, which is really important to health, and also give you sort of these borders throughout the day where it shrinks your eating time a little bit and allows you to, to sort of get rid of the excessive snacking that could go on in the evening.
That's amazing, and, yeah, I love that the body's naturally made to do that stuff, like, it's not something that we have to buy or, create or, whatever. It's like we're just activating, like you said, the body's natural healing process, which is different for everybody. Some people need, 10 hours, 16 hours, 18, whatever it is, and you can go longer for therapeutic benefits. I think you probably talk a lot about this. I know I do in my practice where I ask somebody, "Oh, are you taking a vitamin D?" Like they're troubleshooting fatigue or, something like that. Like, "Oh yeah, I think it's in my multivitamin." And I'm like, "Well, if you're trying to overcome a situation, you need to be more than just a maintenance dose. You need to actually
Right.
be therapeutic with it. And that's probably where your help and your guidelines, start to come, where you can kind of understand where the body's at and then recommend more of a therapeutic type of, fasting and whatnot. So let's say somebody, says, "Hey, Brian, I've tried everything. I'm really interested in what you have to say. I like fasting. I think you're a good guy." You start with the consultation, they're, 20 some odd pounds overweight, kind of a typical American, in their 40s. What would be the process like that you would take them through?
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit. You want to sort of know where you're at, right? So you want to do sort of a baseline assessment, and that could be a couple things. I mean, I think it's good to get a good blood panel,
Mm,
and start with that. See where you're at. Also, potentially a hair mineral test just to see where your minerals are at. Maybe if you do have any heavy metal toxicity, which is something that a lot of people might not even realize. And
mm,
then also, lastly, just to get an idea, instead of just taking their weight, I love to do, if they could do some type of DEXA scan,
mm,
would be great. That's sort of the gold standard, but that'll give them, okay, bone mass, body fat percentage, um, uh, lean mass, and it just tells you, okay, here's where I'm at. Maybe I'm deficient in a few nutrients and things like that, and so that's where supplementation could come into play. And then you sort of work from there and figure out their goals and sort of get crystal clear on their why and things like that, I think that's a good place to start.
I love that, and so many people just say, "Oh, I'm gonna lose weight." It's like, "How much?" "I don't know." "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know." "When are you gonna start?" There's no, like you said, parameters around,
Yeah,
where they're
yeah.
going, and, I think you would probably agree, Americans are probably the people that pay the most for accountability. Like we won't
Mm.
really do something unless someone's holding us accountable to it. There's a few driven people, the ones that are changing the world, obviously, but for the most part, it really helps to have somebody guide you along the way and reinforce the habits and whatnot, that you're starting to create. What are some other things that you see working in conjunction with intermittent fasting that you help people with? What are some other tools in your belt?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual, obviously, but activity upgrade is something I always talk about. And
Mm,
like you talked about before, sometimes less is more when it comes to that. I've actually learned with my workouts, they've gone and they've become more efficient and more time efficient. So instead of doing an hour workout, my workouts have actually shrunk.
mm,
And I advise that a lot of times with people. I think you can get plenty done in 20, 30 minutes
mhm.
and build strength. And these are good first steps. And I think when you have something where it's a small window like 20, 30 minutes, there's less excuses, and it can be done more volume throughout the week. But I think 2, 3 times a week of an activity upgrade of creating some type of resistance training in there, I think is another great place to start. And you don't have to do all this at once. You don't have to, oh, I'm going to start fasting, working out, and
Mhm.
eating clean. I think one step at a time, pick one, get good at it, and then start implementing other avenues.
Yeah, I love that, and that's what I teach as well. It's not about your whole lifestyle overhaul all at once. Like we're not Chip and Joanna trying to, redo the whole thing right away. It's like let's chip away at this so it becomes part of your lifestyle, not just a here's your new body. Now I hope you can take care of it. So
Right.
I love that. I love that perspective. Um, Now, if you wouldn't mind, I think it'd be awesome because we have a lot of kind of like a split audience where a lot of people are interested in health and wellness, and we can go back to it. Um, but let's say there's some other people like you that are passionate about health and wellness, that want to help people like you. Maybe they're not in a place where they can get a job at a gym or whatever. How did you decide like I'm going to start taking my work online? What did that process look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to do more training in a studio, and when I started to dive more into health and wellness, and then part of it was a little bit with COVID. I really
Mm,
ramped it online more and more, and so it was just one of those things where I just started, figuring out sort of a game plan as far as, okay, what can I do to help people virtually? And so I came up with a few different programs. I have one called I call it like a fat burner blueprint, and it's a 6 month program. So I put sort of a system in play, a 6 step system in play that I work clients through, and came up with you know um, sort of what would be optimal for most people that I work with, and put that into the program. And I think that's important to sort of, if you are looking to just like build a business online, is first come up with a system as to how you're going to help people. But
mm.
it's not about perfecting it. I think you start to learn once you work with clients how you can sort of make it the most effective thing possible. So I think first and foremost, a lot of times the first steps for an online business is just reaching out to your warm market and learning about them and figuring out, maybe taking in a few clients, and then going from there. I think some people can get caught up in the certifications and all these different ways that they can build their business, and it can be come down as simple as just to reach out, get a few clients off the bat, and then you can learn a lot from that and build it from there.
So when it comes down to it, really done is better than perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
as long as you have the right intentions and you're putting stuff together, I'm sure you look back at some of your initial programs or something that you did and like, "Oh, man," like, not that that was bad, but
Right.
we coulda done so much better, and really, I mean, money is this kind of, people might not feel like they can charge people or, this and that and the other thing because I'm newer or, whatever. I have a friend He does online marketing, and he's amazing at it. He's worked for companies that does advertising for companies like Hyper Ice and Wilson and the NFL and whatnot. Manages hundreds of millions of dollars of ad spend a year. And he went off on his own. The company that he was working with just had some value congruency issues, and he talked to a client, and they're like, okay, what's your rate? And he's like, oh, it's gonna be 9 grand a month. And they said okay. And he came back to him a couple days later. He's like, sorry, I miscalculated. It's actually 6 grand. And he's like, oh, well, we were willing to pay you the 9 grand. Like, we saw your value there. And so I think we're our worst critics when it comes to valuing who we are and what we can do.
Mhm.
Um, and how did you kind of work through that? Because I think honestly, that's the people with good hearts and the people that really want to help people. I mean, even in person, not just online. It's that difficulty with finding a price for what you did. Because like, okay, so you create this fat burner blueprint that's 6 months. 2 minutes ago that never existed. Like, and then now all of a sudden we're charging. I don't know what you charge for it, but even $300 for it, up to thousands of dollars. Like, how do you um, kind of settle with yourself that you are what you worth, and being able to make that transaction happen without sabotaging yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a struggle for, gosh, that's a struggle for a lot of people and for myself as well. Because, yeah, I actually hired an individual to help me build out this program and put systems in place. But one of the big things that we talked a lot about was just the value that you can bring to an individual. And I think you
Mm,
have to, like, I don't know if it's like convince yourself or prove to yourself that you are worth whatever that high ticket, if you are doing a high ticket item, because the value that you're bringing that individual could be life changing, and
mhm,
this could be something that saves their life.
yeah,
And so I think you have to come in with that mindset, not, oh, this is costing this much, well, maybe I'll give it a little bit off. You should you people will, if people are looking for something and you have what they want, they'll pay for it.
right,
And you have to say, you know what, I've done all this training for the last 20 years, and that's a sort of a combination of everything combined into this
mhm.
program, and that's a lot of time and effort. And so you're worth that much, and you could save, and potentially save their life.
Yeah, and I love that you put that, like, you're not buying the 2 minutes that it took me to create this program, or even if it was 6 months, it took me to create this program. You're
Right.
buying the 20 years of life experience that have gone into it. There's a great story, I don't know if you've heard it, and I'm pretty sure it's true, but if not, it's still a good story. There's a lady that, happened to stumble upon Picasso in a coffee shop, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, can you draw me something?" And he's like, "Sure." And so he whipped something up on a napkin in a couple minutes. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, thank you. My kids will love this, whatever it is." And he's like, "That'll be $3,000." And she's like, you just drew this on a napkin in like 2 seconds. Like, what? I'm not, paying 3 grand for this or whatever." And he's like, "Lady, you're not paying for like 2 minutes that it took me to draw a napkin. You're paying for the lifetime it took me to
Right.
build my reputation and to build my skill and whatnot." And so I think that you're right that thought process is really empowering, for people, because even if you're new, like let's say you were an accountant, you've been training, at a gym forever, and then realize like I don't want to sit in a cubicle anymore. Like I want to actually help people through training. Even though if you just got your certification last weekend, you still have a lifetime and a story that matters to people, because maybe you're going to inspire other accountants and then start to work out because they thought that, whatever it is, it's like the story is in you is what's valuable. The experiences and the qualification, whatever. Sometimes that lets you charge more. Sometimes that makes the sale easier, but it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily determine who you are and what you're worth. And I think that's what most people struggle with when starting an online business. They might have a great product that nobody ever sees because they're afraid to market it, because they're afraid of I'm not worth it. And
Right.
I think that could circle back beautifully into training people, because I think that mental, emotional part of it, getting people to believe that, hey, I can lose 20 pounds. I can find a lifestyle that actually allows me to be a healthy person, not get healthy and try to stay healthy, but who you are is healthy. What are some of the aspects of your program that you take people through that maybe aren't practical or tactical in a way of like, hey, most people like, apples, but these are actually high in sugar. Or, like something that's more on the mental, emotional side of things that, makes a difference in helping people succeed in whatever program that you're doing.
Mm. Well, you mentioned it already once is the accountability part, right? I think
Mm,
most people probably know the difference that, an apple is healthier than eating a, I don't know, piece of,
candy, yeah.
yeah, exactly, a Snickers bar, let's just say.
Mhm,
So I think people understand what health is for the most part, but they're not willing to necessarily, you know, go down that route, and they keep yo-yo dieting, or they've tried it and failed, and tried something else. So I think being held accountable is one. I
mm,
think that's huge value right there. And you mentioned that. And then also just understanding your reasons around why, you want to get where you want to go. Creating that clarity, I think, is really important as well. And sometimes you can get into a program, and then, a few weeks into it, you sort of fall off it, and you're falling off it probably because you don't have a strong enough why. So I
mm.
really think that those two things are really big, and that's why, getting a coach in any aspect of your life, I think, is important because of those pieces.
Yeah, that's an incredible answer, and, I couldn't agree more with that aspect of it. Because even me as a chiropractor, like, people are coming in, a typical, or classic case would be, I have back pain or neck pain and I wanna get better, and it's like, "Alright, well, I can do an adjustment or 2 or whatever," and you might be feel a little bit of relief, just like, "Okay, we can do a workout or 2, taking this, that out of a diet," and you might lose a couple of pounds, but what do you really want? Like, what is this back
Right.
pain preventing you from doing? What is this weight preventing you from doing? And that's where you really start to get to the transformation because, kind of like we talked about earlier, that's when you get into who do you want to be, not just what do you want to happen, because this isn't going to happen to you. You have to become someone different. And, actually, I was just talking with a client yesterday. I was saying, like, I work out, but I don't necessarily like train. I would say, there's a difference. Like, I work out so I can be healthy, but I like to be in a position where I'm training and kind of getting stronger and whatnot. And it's that lack of like, I don't really have a why. Like, I don't have any mountains planned to climb. I don't have any Spartan races on the schedule. I don't have, any of those sort of things. And so, figuring out, it's like, okay, like, I wanna get that competitive spirit back. Like, I wanna challenge myself beyond, I'm tired, I don't wanna do that 3rd rep or that 8th set
Hmm.
or, like, whatever it is. And I think that's huge, and I'm so excited that you go through that with people because I think that's one reason the medical system fails, is they don't ask, like, "Why are you anxious? What do you wanna be less anxious for?" I think that's one thing that the medical or the educational system fails. Okay, let's learn our numbers, this and that. Let's learn all, algebra, but what do you want to do with that? Not just become a nurse or a teacher or whatever, but like, how do you want to change lives? And that's really that long vision rather than that myopic, short term type of thing. And I love having conversations with people like you that's how we think. Like, let's make a difference for the long term in your life. Like, let's help you turn you on to then inspire and change others. Like, I'm sure your ideal client is someone that was struggling with their health. They turned their health around, but then they wanted to do what you do, and help other people. I mean, I think that's the ultimate success because now it's this multiplication of mindset and health and wellness that goes on rather than just all be dependent on, okay, let's find, somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. I think that, uh, sometimes people need to have a date on the calendar. Maybe if it is a
Mm,
race or a wedding or something to work towards, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, so you got to sort of dig a little deeper and figure out, well, what's the true reason why you want to, do you want to play with your kids, being able to play with your
yeah.
kids in the next 20 years, or your grandkids, or whatever it is. I think it's really important to hone in on that.
And it's really that switching of I want to do this, whatever it is, out of fear of not having, blah blah blah, out of fear of, I don't look good or whatever, and switching that into I want to engage in this, program or whatever it is because I want something out of it. So stepping away from this fear mindset of trying to get away from something and stepping into this is what I'm pursuing,
Mm.
and I think when you can really turn somebody on in that way of like I am pursuing health and wellness for the sake of being able to play with my grandkids or whatever it is. It's like, man, that's a lifestyle that you're never going to be able to step away from because you have something that's important in your mind, and it's not fear that's going to overcome you, that's going to paralyze you. It's fear that's going to challenge you. rather than, than take you the other way. If people are listening and they're interested in, okay, I'm ready to take that next step. Maybe I'm not completely ready to go, one-on-one coaching or, whatever. What are some
Mhm.
things that you offer that might be a good step for people?
Yeah, I mean, they could set up a simple like 15-minute consult. I think that's a
Hmm.
good place to start. And then we can, from there, I can figure out a tool for them because I have a few. I mean, I know I have a 21-day intermittent fasting challenge. That's so they can get there from the website, but it's 21dayfastingchallenge.com. So yeah, I think if they just go to my website, briangryn.com, and right in there it says, let's chat. You can just send me actually you put your name, email, and quick message to me, and then we can set up a time. I think that's a good place to start, and then I can figure out like what tool would work best for you, and to get to help you reach your goals.
I love that. Well, any kind of like closing, words or remarks or inspiration that you want to leave with people?
Oof.
I know.
Yeah, I would say that there'll never be a perfect time to start whatever you want to start, right?
Mm,
Like if you want to get healthier, like there'll never be a perfect time. So I think it's, a lot of people can find excuses, but I think the most important thing is just taking those small steps. And whether that's going for a 10-minute walk, after you have your first meal or whatever it is, start with that, start small and just get those small wins early on. I think that's a good place to start to sort of build momentum.
agreed 100%. Get that first victory and then it's
Yeah,
addicting from there.
exactly.
Awesome, Brian. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I had an incredible conversation. I think people are going to love listening to this. It's pretty well versed from being able to change their life from a health and wellness perspective to just getting started and really an online business or really in anything, knowing their value and their worth. And I love that that just came out because I think that's, at least who you are, on your website. And it's not about, you know, weight loss as much as it is like let's transform your life and light a fire in your butt to be a better person to make more impact. And so I love that that just comes out in every which direction that we take our conversation. So I'm excited for people to get to know you, and hopefully go book a consultation and look forward to changing their life.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me on. Love it.
All right, awesome.